We've been fortunate with our guests on the podcast so far. Today, the list continues to expand with Fox Sports senior AFL reporter Tom Morris. Since completing his journalism degree at La Trobe University in 2013, he has worked as a junior writer and senior reporter for Backpage Lead, the St Kilda Football Club, Tab Sportsbet, K-Rock and Bay FM radio stations, SEN, Croc Media, before transitioning to his current role at Fox Sports. He's been kind enough to join me today and give some of his personal time up. Fresh off the conclusion of the Big Bash, Tom, how have you been?
Dylan, thanks for having me. You've done your homework there. Nicely done. I'd actually forgotten that I'd done some of that work so many years ago now, but I appreciate the introduction.
Firstly, do I have permission to distribute this on our podcast, Sound the Siren?
Absolutely, yes, you do.
All right, no worries at all. So we'll just kick things off. The first question that I have for you is, what is a typical day in the life of Tom Morris?
That is a great question. There is no such thing as a typical day. I mean, it depends what you're interested in. I can talk to you about a typical day in cricket season or in footy season. What are you more interested in?
I'm happy to hear a little bit of both if you're...
Okay. Well, let's deal with a typical weekday in the footy season. Let's say it's a Tuesday. I would wake up and go to the gym. Not that you're interested in that. And then I'd have some ideas in my mind about what stories I wanted to chase for the day, mostly emanating from the Monday night shows. There might be something that I've broken or another journalist has broken or that a footy club has put out, because Monday is sort of the big footy news day. And then I'll normally just be at home, or certainly in COVID times, be at home, make some calls, talk to a few people about some things coming up. It's sort of unusual because it's not like I've got this, this calendar that says, okay, on this day, you're going to write this. It's like, it just depends what's happening, in the industry at that time. So I'll be on the phone. Maybe if something happens, I might be on the phone chasing a story about Geelong, and all of a sudden I get a text message from someone saying that, a story about West Coast is about to break. Go with the story. So I've just got to put Geelong to one side and just write something about West Coast. So that would happen most of the day. Then at about 2 or 3 o'clock, I'd have a phone conversation or an in-person conversation with the producer for AFL Tonight. AFL Tonight is on at 7 p.m. on Fox Footy and Fox Sports News every night.
Yep.
And I'll talk about what news I'd like to speak about that evening. And sometimes it's my news. Other times it's, this morning Sam Walsh has re-signed for Carlton. So I would talk about that news, how significant it is, maybe look at who's off contract at Carlton now, who else they're looking to re-sign, how they're balancing their books. So it doesn't have to be a big story, just trying to, add to the one that's already come out. And I'd go into work maybe about 4 o'clock. Again, speak to some people at work. It's always good to see them face to face, and then end up going on the show at about 7 o'clock, doing about anywhere between sort of 2 and 6 minutes of news, depending on what I have. And then go home from there. I'd sort of be home by about 7:30 or 7:40. So it's like a slow start to the day. I don't need to be in the office at 9 or 10 o'clock, but I finish at about 7 or 7:30. And that's sort of the general weekday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday and Mondays are a bit different. And then in the cricket season, I don't know, like it just changes all the time. Depends whether there's a test match on, whether there's a big bash game on. Today I'm researching a story for, the 7th of February now. So in 2 days' time, it's 20 years to the day since Australia won the under-19 one-day World Cup. So in that team was George Bailey, Cameron White, Adam Crosswaite, Peter Siddle was in the squad, Xavier Doherty, Sean Marsh played, Craig Simmons. There were others as well. So I just came up with this idea a couple of months ago. Geez, I wouldn't mind doing like a sort of a Where Are They Now piece from 2002. Yeah. So I'm just researching that today. But again, if something pops up, if I get a text message saying something's happened, then I'll just put that to one side and do that. So cricket season's a little bit more fluid. Footy season's a bit more structured, and each day is slightly different.
And I imagine just with the footy season, especially around the trade deadline, you have your first crack podcast. You'd be very busy around, especially the last few days, I assume, waking up early and then breaking any news possible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, a good example of that was... God, you're making me think about footy now. I'm trying to remember who was the player. The player that went from the Adelaide Crows. No, went from Sydney to the Adelaide Crows.
Dawson?
Yeah, Dawson. Yeah, Dawson. You can tell I haven't thought about footy for a couple of months. But I knew that deal was imminent. I think on the penultimate day of the trade period. I couldn't quite get it. And then I happened to I was just up watching TV with my girlfriend at about 10 or 10:30 at night. And I got a message from someone, I think it's done. And I chased it and ended up getting the story. We put it out at about 11 o'clock at night. Because if I'd waited to the next morning, it would have got out elsewhere at 6 a.m. So I just had to get it. I spoke to my editor who happened to be on that night. So that was late at night. And then I was up early, chasing other stories. So yeah, the trade period, I'll put the trade period out of my mind. I love it at the time, but it gives me shivers thinking about it. The best time of the year is the day after the trade period, because it means there's another year until we have to do that all again. It's just a crazy time. And it's about proper journalism. It's fantastic, but it's full on, that's for sure. And it's full days.
Yeah, especially with spontaneous deals like Jeremy Finlayson, I know was decided a few days before the end of it. So we'll rewind back now. You graduated in 2009. We'll talk about your journey. Was it always journalism? And if so, was it primarily sport?
Good question, Dylan. I like to think that I first became interested in sports media when I was a young kid. But I don't think I ever realistically thought that I wanted to be a sports journalist until maybe I started studying. I mean, my strengths at school were not maths or science or languages or anything like that. So really, by default, I got pushed into humanities, English and politics and geography and history, these sort of subjects. So I knew I never, there's some people that have too many choices. I've got mates who are super smart and they could be a lawyer. They could be a marine biologist. They could be anything they want. They could be a rocket scientist. They could be a doctor. And it's sort of, it always means that while they're doing one thing, they're sort of thinking, well, I wouldn't mind doing that as well. I wouldn't mind owning a business over here. Whereas I knew, my skill set was very narrow. Like, I like to read, I like to write, and I like to talk. So I knew that I wanted to something in media, maybe. I didn't know I knew I loved sports, so it made sense to come together. So yeah, graduated in 2009. I enrolled in arts at Melbourne. Again, very broad degree, but something that had nothing to do with numbers, which is really important for me. And then I was enrolled in arts at Melbourne, went on a gap year to England, played some cricket, came back, decided that, actually one of my mum's friends said that there's a new course opening at La Trobe University in 2011, sports journalism. I was like, this is perfect. Yes, I've had a year away. Let's jump into that. So I unenrolled at Melbourne and went straight to sports journalism, did 3 years of that. And then loved it. Probably from when I first started, I thought, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. But as you would know, sports journalism has changed so much. There was no Twitter when I finished school. And when I started uni, Twitter existed, but I didn't know about it. I only got Twitter, I think, in early 2012, which was about, 13 or 14 months into my first year, my degree. So, Twitter's now a big part of the industry is what I'm saying. And the industry's changed so much. So being a sports journalist isn't what it used to be, and what it is now probably isn't what it will be. But I certainly enjoy what I do, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities I've received and the chances people have taken on me.
Yeah, for sure. And how was it that you ended up applying for your first job in the sector?
That is a good question again. I didn't actually apply for my first job in journalism. My first gig, which was unpaid, was me contacted the Northern Footy League in 2012, and I said, if you want someone to come and do some work, write some match reports, I'll do that. Because they used to have I don't know if they still do. Samuel Zito was the name of the media manager there. I'm not sure if he's still there. He was a couple of years ago. Good fella. And he said, yeah, come along. We can't pay you, but you can write a few match reports if you want. Go to Montmorency on a Saturday, or North Heidelberg, or go and watch West Preston. And I did that for about half a year. Every Saturday I'd drive out to the northern suburbs and watch, high standard of footy. Sometimes it was quite, it was quite spirited and intense, but it was awesome. Interview both coaches after the game and then go home and write a match report, then email through that match report on a Saturday evening before going out to see mates. And then on the Wednesday or Thursday, whatever day it was, that match report would be in the magazine, in the league weekly record. And I remember thinking to myself, how awesome is this? Like, my name, like Tom Morris, like West Preston defeats North Heidelberg by 24 points, and it was 400 words of my writing, and everyone's reading it. Or not everyone, but I would think at the time everyone was reading it. how awesome is this? Again, unpaid gig, and then which was fine at the time. I was still studying. I was halfway through my second year, giving me good experience, meeting people and talking to people and things like that. And then about halfway through the year, I got a call from someone at St Kilda Footy Club who knew my old next door neighbour, Patrick Lane, who is Tim Lane's nephew, who I grew up next door to. A really big influence in my career in the early days. He worked at Leader newspapers, and he said, there's this person at St Kilda that wants to call you to see if you can do some content for them. So I said, okay, I'm up for this. So St Kilda asked me to do 5 talking points for every game of the season, for most of the season, probably the last 2/3 of the season. And 5 talking points, as you know, is easy. You just pick 5 discussion topics and write it and then send it in. I remember thinking to myself, how awesome is this? That my name is on the St Kilda website and all these St Kilda nuffies are reading my stories on the Saints website. Like that, again, unpaid, but didn't matter. So I'll just write it at home. For the last 2 games of the year in 2012, the digital manager, Rob Alexander, who I'm still mates with, he went away to America with his partner. So they got me into the media box. And I remember walking in the media box going, this is awesome. Like Mark Robinson is sitting there. Dennis Cometti would come into the media box before the game and have a couple of sausage rolls and get his binoculars and look at the players. Still remember going to a St Kilda Bulldogs game and he was looking at the players and he was asking the Bulldogs media manager, how do you say this guy's name? It was Nathan Rovat, but it was spelt, Hrovat. Yeah. So I remember clearly sitting there while Dennis Cometti is a metre away, speaking. I'm like, this is surreal. What am I doing? I'm so out of place in this media box. So that was a great experience, being part of that, just being allowed in the media box was awesome. And then in 2013, which was my last year of uni, St Kilda obviously liked what I did the year before and they offered me a part-time job, $15 an hour or something, which was my first paid gig, but I didn't apply for that job. It was just sort of progression from what happened in 2012. And I think it was 2 days a week and then match day. And then from 2014 and 2015, I was full-time at St Kilda. But yeah, I didn't apply for my first gig. I got very lucky that I happened to get in at St Kilda. They must have liked sort of how I wrote, and eventually they sort of created something for me, which was awesome. I think if I had to apply for something and go through a process, I would have been extremely nervous. So I was happy with the faith that the Saints showed in me for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And what would you say you have done to get where you are today? Because I imagine it's a lot of hard work behind the scenes, persistence, and all of the above.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of luck involved. I'm not sitting here pretending that I'm more talented or more hardworking than lots of other people in the industry or people that are trying to get into the industry that can't quite get that lucky break yet. I got a lucky break because at St Kilda Footy Club we had a fantastic HR person who wanted to help everyone with their careers. So if you worked in merchandise or if you worked in membership, part of her job was to set everyone up with a mentor in the industry that they wanted to work in. So they asked me, who do you want your mentor to be? This was 2015. And I said, geez, I don't know. Because I idolize, like Bruce McAvaney or Dennis Cometti or, I don't know, Mark Nicholas, you name it. But they were way too high. I needed someone with respect that wasn't so out of reach, someone that I could actually possibly, speak to on a similar sort of level, even though they were higher than me. So I remember watching a lot of Fox Sports News when I was growing up, and I really liked, and I still watch a lot of it, but I really liked Chris Stubbs, who is more of a motorsport reporter now, does some stuff on Channel 7 and Fox, but he worked at Fox Sports News at the time. So I just said to the HR person, is there any way you can set me up with a meeting with Chris Stubbs? I really like his on-air persona. He's very relaxed. He's easy to understand. Anyway, they set it up, and from about midway through 2015, maybe once a month, so probably 6 or 7 times, I went to South Melbourne and had a coffee with him. And coincidentally, at that time, Fox Footy was setting up a website. They just set it up, I think, at the start of the year. I didn't know about it. It was still in its infancy. A couple of guys had come across from the Herald Sun because it's all understood the News Corp banner. And Chris Stubbs sort of said, look, they're setting up this website. They might want some people. And I thought, okay. Anyway, I got a lucky break because, it just it's all worked out beautifully in terms of timing. And then later in the year, probably October-ish, Fox Footy offered me a job because they liked the work I was doing on the St Kilda website. And I said, yes, absolutely, I'll take it. I wasn't done at St Kilda. I was happy at St Kilda, but it was the right move to get to Fox Footy and work on something that was building up. And then from there, the Fox Footy website job that I had, I still work for the Fox Sports website, but it's sort of grown into podcasting and radio and TV and other things. But it started off me just pumping out 6 to 8 articles a day for the Fox Footy website in 2016 and 2017, which is awesome. That's the best way to learn, just get the volume up. But it was all because the HR person at St Kilda had set us up with a mentor. She didn't need to do that. She'd have no idea what sort of influence she had in my career, but it was crucial. And then the fact that Chris Stubbs was really loyal as well. His influence I don't forget either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And at Fox Footy, I'd say you're known for breaking news live, but as you said, you also wrote articles. So how did you transition from writing articles into breaking the big news live?
What I just did, I think writing articles is great. Content analysis, the odd comment piece, but my view is if you're going to work in sports journalism and you're not a gun host or a gun commentator, as I'm neither of them, then you have to start breaking stories at some point. It doesn't mean you've got to break heaps of stories at all. You might break, 8 or 10 a year, but I think unless you are like Kath Lotman is a gun host, like that is her go. Like Ben Waterworth, who I work with at Fox, like he's a gun commentator. So they don't need to as much. But in my position, I sort of have to start breaking some stories. And I remember breaking a couple of stories earlier, thought it was pretty cool. I broke one about the Jamie Elliott had a bad ankle injury, and I put that out, and then Collingwood confirmed it after. And I was like, oh, this is good. People are going, oh, people are reading this. Again, it gave me that sort of same warm feeling as what I had 5 or 6 years earlier at the Northern Footy League when I'd write stories about Caden Pettifer kicking 9 goals. So for Montmorency. But so I transitioned from that the big break was sort of early 2018, because in early 2018, I got a story that it was a bad story in the end. Mark Bomber Thompson's house had been raided for drugs. And I put that story out, and that sort of made the bosses realize that I could do more if they wanted me to do more. At that time, Caroline Wilson took a step back from the Age. Jake Nile, who was at Fox and clearly more senior than me, went back to the Age as their chief footy writer. So then there was an opening for someone to take on his sort of role at Fox. And after that story, they must have thought that Tom's ready, which looking back on it, I probably wasn't. I was 26 years old. I'll never forget, they got me on the couch for the first round of 2018. And I just couldn't believe what I was doing. I had Paul Roos to my right, Gary Lyon, Jonathan Brown, and Jared Healy. What am I doing? But Jared Healy's been the biggest influence in my career as a mentor. He took me under his wing, got me involved in radio, made me more comfortable on air, gave me good advice, gave me a whack when I needed it, gave me praise whenever he thought I did something well. But that transition was actually quite sudden. I didn't have a lot of TV training aside from what I did at university. I had to sort of learn on the job. And I don't know if you can tell, Dylan, I speak quite quickly. So my constant battle in my mind is slowing myself down, making myself more clear for the listener. And the slower I speak, the easier it is to listen to, but also the longer I have to think about what I'm going to say next. So it's like a double tick if I can speak slowly. But when you're nervous or you don't know the content as well, you speak a bit quicker. Yeah. So the key is knowing the content, backing yourself, understanding what you're going to say, and then you can speak slowly and you can make sense. But it's not like I've had anyone hold my hand through this process. I've had to do it myself. It hasn't come completely naturally.
Yeah. No, I think you're a little harsh on yourself. On the First Crack podcast, you're a pretty solid host.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, but I'm not. What I'm saying? It's like hosting's not my number one thing. I've learned to host. I can probably do it to a level.
Yeah.
But I've still got a long way to go. So I had to. The only reason I got to host First Crack, which is awesome, or host the odd Big Bash game or things like that, or host the draft, the second day of the draft, or the trade shows. Because I was breaking stories in the first place. That's the only reason. It's not like they put someone into host if they don't break. So breaking stories is number one. And it still, for me, is number one as much as I can. I try to do cricket in the summer, footy in the winter.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So as you said, with the Jordan Dawson story, you said your editor was on or live that night. But Is there a required process you have to go through before publishing that certain story?
Well, the process is my editor trusts me that I'm right. So they're not asking where I got the story from or how certain am I which is good because this is my integrity at stake. So, if I get it wrong, then it's on me. So the process is I would get online. I'd say to my editor, hey mate, I'm just chasing this story. I'm not far away. Can someone just build me a shell, which is like the back end, which is like put a photo in, a headline, put like the relevant, KO subscription type taglines in. And then as soon as I get the story, in the end, with that one, I think I just wrote like 4 sentences. Just Jordan Dawson will be in Adelaide play next year. The deal's done. This is the deal. Bang, bang, bang. Sent it through. Get 4 sentences up. They publish it, put it on social media, and then as they're putting it on social media, I add to it. Dawson played this many games with the Sydney Swans. The Crows were looking for this deal. The Swans were looking for this deal. Is X amount of years old? So it becomes a fat story. So if you log on in the morning, you'll see a fat story. If you log on at that moment that you see it on social media, it's only a short story, but you get the details that you need just to get that story out. Because I'm thinking, if I wait half an hour to write 400 words, it'll be beautiful, it'll be nice, but I might not be able to get the story first. So I've got to get that story out as long as I know it's right and make sure that people know that Fox has broken it. And then I can just add to it as it goes. But the process is really just to speak to my editor and make sure that someone can help me, put it together while I'm writing it. And people at Fox are great. Ben Waterworth and Max Lawton, I work with at Fox Footy. They're awesome. And so David Zeta and Ben Cotton. And then there's people in Sydney as well that can help. So there's always someone on up until about midnight at night. So luckily there was that night. Otherwise I would have been stuffed.
Do you find it a race to break the news?
Yeah, it is a race. Yeah. It is. Even though the general public doesn't care, I don't think too much who breaks stories. I'm beholden to getting the story first as much as I can. You can't get every story first, clearly. I think if you get 20%, you're doing pretty well. But being first is important because there's a financial element to it. Yeah. If you do a story for the website and you're first, then people are more likely to click on that story because they haven't seen it anywhere else before. And then there's advertising dollars, etc., that are attached to that. Equally, if you break a story on TV and then people are thinking about changing the channel, but next time you come on, you're on with another breaking story, I'll just wait for a bit and there's advertising dollars attached to that. So even though I get it, the general public doesn't really care if you're 2 minutes earlier than anyone else. And I probably used to be the same as well. But in the sports media world, it does matter because there's actually a fiscal element to it too.
Now your job is serious for the most part, but you do appear live on air for Fox Cricket, Fox Footy as a boundary reporter sometimes. What is the funniest moment or just a comedic moment that you'd love to share on the air or even off air?
The funniest moment. It's hard for me because I try to be professional. So, and I'm not very funny. I'm not a comedian. So, there's some people that can go on air and just make jokes the whole time. I'm not as much about that. I think probably something that happened, which I can laugh at now, which I couldn't laugh at the time as much, is there was a final. What was the final? Is it the Gabba last year? I think not last year, 2020. I think Geelong lost their first final to Brisbane, the qualifying final. Then Geelong went and ended up meeting Richmond in the grand final. But Jonathan Brown had said something on Fox Footy about Geelong's selection or the way their team set up. And I only caught the back half of it, but because I was at the ground, I only caught the back half of it. And what I always try to do as much as possible, because in a press conference, you've got Tom Brown sitting there with a Channel 7 microphone, which is fine. But if I can get a question in that mentions Fox Footy, it just lets people know that Fox Footy is involved as much as possible. But I stuffed up the question. Oh, God, I made a complete meal of it to Chris Scott. I said, Jonathan Brown has said this. And Chris Scott said, well, what do you mean he said that? Can you expand on it? And I went, oh, God, I've only heard the back half of what Jonathan Brown says. And I completely cooked it. And they were taking the press conference live on Fox Footy. So at the desk in Melbourne is Gary Lyon and Jonathan Brown and Nick Rewalt. Yeah. And I'm at the press conference, get my phone's lighting up going, what are you doing? You've completely cooked it. Then that was the end of the press conference. I clearly stuffed it up. And then they got back on air and they're just laying into me, those 3 guys. Like, what is Tommy doing? We've sent him up to Brisbane. He's got no idea what he's saying. He's completely misquoted a superstar, Jonathan Brown. Oh, so it was like heart-wrenching at the time. Funny now, we still laugh about it. But it is a good lesson on a serious note, because if you don't know something, say you don't know. Don't try to weasel your way around it and make it up. Just say, I didn't hear. I mean, I shouldn't have referenced Jonathan Brown without hearing exactly what he'd said in full. Yeah. That was the issue. So yeah, funny for them, not very funny for me. That's probably the best I've got for you.
No, was it live on air that they were having a go at you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fox Footy seems to do that. They have a good relationship with everyone. So
yeah, they do. No, it's all fine.
Yeah. The final question: what advice do you have for aspiring, budding broadcasters or journalists, such as myself, for example?
My advice is to meet as many different people as you can and say yes to as many different things as you can. You know, it might not be the perfect job for you.
Yeah.
If you want to be a commentator of footy and cricket, for example, and you get offered to call hockey or basketball at a state league level, do it. You know, like if you want to, if you get offered, if you want to do some content and you see a job is going at Golf Australia and you don't know much about golf, but you just do it. Just say, yes, I'll do that. You know, anytime, because what happens is in the sports media industry, someone works in footy, they then go to cricket and they might remember you from seeing you in footy, or you might be a really good WNBL caller or basketball, and that person goes and works at a footy club and remembers, oh, yeah, I actually worked with that guy. Yeah, I remember him. He's great. Or that girl, she's great. So my advice would just be to, and this is all I did, and no one actually gave me this advice. I think I just sort of took it on because, you know, the only reason I got a gig at St Kilda is because I went to the Northern Footy League in the first place off my own bat. You know, the only reason I got a job at Fox is because I just picked a mentor that was about right at the time for me. So it is lucky, but you sort of make your own luck as well. It's a bit of a combination. But the main thing is just to meet as many different people as you can. Like, you know, a wanky term is networking. I think that sort of reminds me of, you know, being in suits, standing with red wines, you know, talking about the markets or finance or shares or whatever. I think the best way to do it is just have coffee with someone, or just have a drink with someone, have lunch, and meet as many different people as you can that way. And if you do that and you get to understand the landscape of the industry, and when you get a chance, you're reliable, dependable, then you'll end up being okay. But there's a lot of people that say, oh, no, the industry's doomed. It's impossible to get a job. I actually think there's more jobs than ever because the media is so diverse. Social media jobs are now flying. Brian Taylor came to speak to us at uni when I think it was 2012. Brian Taylor came. So BT rolls in and he goes, you know, for the first time, guys, we're looking for someone to do the social media and we're happy to pay them on a part-time basis at Channel 7. If you look at that now, like Channel 7 would have lots of social media people, you know, and so would every organization. So I think there's more jobs than ever. You might not start where you want to start, but in the end, it's about getting in, meeting as many different people, doing the best job you can, and then you'll fly from there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you again for taking your time to join me today. It was good to ask you some questions. We got the comedic story of you stepping up the Jonathan Brown story live on air, but be sure to follow Tom on Instagram, and if you want to see his personality even more, he's on TikTok. So.
Unfortunately for everyone, yes.
No, but thanks again, Tommy. It was good to chat to you, and I hope the viewers enjoyed. We will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan.